Hello and welcome to another IELTS video. Since there has been quite a lot of demand on reading for some reason, in this video we're gonna solve another reading passage from an IELTS practice test. I have already made a couple of videos on reading actually, where I explain the right techniques that you should use for the test, and also I solved a couple of examples. So if you haven't seen that video, please go and check it out. Today, I'm gonna dive right into solving the passage that's in front of me. And this is reading passage number 3, which is supposedly the most difficult one. So let's get started. So the passage that I have here is the case for mixed ability classes. So as we can tell from the title of the passage, the topic here is about education. Now, I skimmed through it quickly just to get an overall understanding of the text itself, and then I'm gonna go right to the questions. So if I start with questions 27 to 30, choose the correct letter A, B, C, or D. And if I start with the very first question, which is number 27, the writer describes the Romeo and Juliet lesson in order to demonstrate, and then I have 4 different choices. A, how few students are interested in literature. B, how teacher handles a range of learning needs. C, how unsuitable Shakespeare is for most teenagers. Or D, how weaker students can disrupt their classmates' learning. So the keywords that I can spot right away is Romeo and Juliet. And if I go back to the text, that's in the very first paragraph. So if we go through that, picture this scene. It's an English literature lesson in a UK school, and the teacher has just read an extract from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet with a class of 15-year-olds. He's just given some of the students a copy of No Fear Shakespeare, a kid-friendly translation of the original. For 3 students, even these literacy demands are beyond them. So the No Fear Shakespeare is basically a copy of the original piece that's written by Shakespeare. However, if you are familiar with Shakespeare writing, the English that was used back in the day is actually might be considered difficult for some people to understand it. So I assume this new version, which is called the No Fear Shakespeare, is more of a simplified writing of Shakespeare, is probably using more simpler language for other people who might find the original piece difficult to understand. So he's given some of the students copies of the No Fear Shakespeare, and also some of the students had like the original piece. And for 3 students, even these literacy demands are beyond them. So for 3 students, even the simplified version, the No Fear Shakespeare, is still a bit challenging for them. Another girl simply can't focus, and he gives her pens and paper to draw with. So there is basically another girl who can't even focus on even the simplified version or the original version, and the teacher simply gives her a pen and paper here to draw to keep her busy. The teacher can ask the No Fear group to identify the key characters and maybe provide a tentative plot summary. He can ask most of the class about character development, and 5 of them might be able to support their statements with textual evidence. Now, 2 curious students are wondering whether Shakespeare's advocate live in a life of moderation or one of passionate engagement. Overall, I feel like this paragraph number 1, it just shows you the diversity, or that there is a difference in the range of abilities across all these students, because you had a group who actually can understand, are interested in the original piece of Shakespeare, another group are given simplified version, some other students are given some other things to do because that is still even challenging for them, and then the task itself differs for those students. Some students are asked to provide a summary, and then other students are basically debating some other aspects that's described there. And all these tasks differ in the range of difficulty. So if we go back to the question, the writer describes the Romeo and Juliet lesson in order to demonstrate. So I feel that the right answer here is B, which is how a teacher handles a range of learning needs. If we go to question 28, what does the writer say about streaming in the third paragraph? It tells me the exact paragraph that I need to go to, which is the third paragraph, so let's start reading there. The practice of streaming, that's our keyword, but let's see what the streaming means. Or tracking involves separating students into classes depending on their diagnosed levels of attainment. So it's basically separating students depending on their academic levels. At a macro level, it requires the establishment of academically selective schools for the brightest students and comprehensive schools for the rest. So at a big level or a big scale, you have schools that are only for bright students. Those are high achieving students, students that can get high grades. And then on the other hand, you have other schools that are for average students, those who are not very bright, according to the text. But if you look within the same school, it means selecting students into a stream of general ability or set of subject-specific ability. The practice is intuitively appealing to almost every stakeholder. On the other hand, if we talk about within the same school or within the same class, you simply have to put those students in different sets or in different groups. So yeah, let's say you divide them even within the same classroom. So you put the smart students or the bright students in one group, and then you put the average or not the smartest students in another group. The practice is intuitively appealing to almost every stakeholder. So if we say the practice is appealing, it means that it's interesting or attractive to almost every stakeholder. And by stakeholder, we mean students, whether the bright students or the average students, and I assume also the teachers as well. So to answer question number 28, what does the writer say about streaming in the third paragraph? A, it has a very broad appeal. B, it favors cleverer students. C, it is relatively simple to implement. Or D, it works better in some schools than others. I think the right answer here is A, which was in the very last sentence. The practice is intuitively appealing to almost every stakeholder. So broadly appealing, it means at a generally appealing or at a large scale for pretty much everyone. So that's the right answer, which is A. Now, if we move to question number 29, what idea is suggested by the reference to Mount Komolangma in the fifth paragraph? It tells me the exact paragraph that I need to go to, and that is the fifth paragraph. And then if I go there, actually I feel like in order to understand what's going on in paragraph 5, it is better to read paragraph number 4 as well, because it explains the analogy. I have heard the mixed ability model attacked by way of analogy. So when you make an analogy, it means that you are basically making a comparison. You compare something to also like a similar thing. A group hike. So here, the analogy here is between going for a hike, and that's like an outdoor activity in the mountains. The fittest in the group take the lead and set a brisk pace, only to have to stop and wait every 20 minutes. This is frustrating, and their enthusiasm wanes. Meanwhile, the slowest ones are not only embarrassed but physically struggling to keep up. What's worse, they never get a long enough break. They honestly just want to quit. Hiking, they feel, is not for them. So here the writer is saying that the mixed ability model is the same as going for a hike in the mountains. The fittest, and those can be compared to the smartest people. So the fittest in the group take the lead and set a brisk pace. So what we mean here, the fittest, those who are very sporty, take the lead. So they are always at the front and they are moving at a brisk pace, which means when we say brisk, it means quick, active and energetic. So they are like moving fast. They enjoy that. On the other hand, only to have to stop and wait every 20 minutes. So they want to move on, they want to go fast. And then on the other hand, you have the other students who are not as fit. They are not really sporty. They might be obese or basically less active. so they cannot move at the same pace. So because of that, those who are the fittest, they have to stop and wait for their classmate. This is frustrating, so it's basically frustrating as their enthusiasm wanes. And what we mean by wanes is sort of like fade, slowly becoming weaker. Because if you are really excited, you can do it, but every 20 minutes you have to stop, and then at one point it kills your enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the slowest ones are not only embarrassed but physically struggling to keep up, and also those who we mentioned, who are less active, they cannot move at the same fast pace. They are also struggling and they feel really embarrassed psychologically. What's worse, they never get a long enough break. So what's worse is that because those students probably need really long breaks, but because the others are waiting for them, they still have to move. So they are not really enjoying that experience. They honestly just want to quit. Hiking, they feel, is not for them. And then if we go to the 5th paragraph, mixed ability classes bore students, frustrate parents and burn out teachers. The brightest ones will never summit Mount Komolangma, and the strugglers won't enjoy the lovely stroll in the park they are perhaps more suited to. So because those fittest ones, they cannot move very fast, they are sort of like always held back by other students who cannot keep up with their pace, then at the end of the day they can never reach the summit. And I don't really know where this summit is, but what it means essentially is that they can never attain that high level where they want to go. And at the same time, the other students who might prefer to enjoy walking the park, they're not there. So essentially, individuals suffer at the demands of the collective. So the collective is like what's going overall is affecting everyone, but not in a nice way. Mediocrity prevails. Mediocrity, which means very bad standards or not really good standards, prevails. It means that it takes control or is spread, affecting everyone there. So what idea is suggested by the reference to Mount Komolangma in the 5th paragraph? A. Students following unsuitable paths. B. Students attempting interesting tasks. C. Students not achieving their full potential. D. Students not being aware of their limitations. And the correct answer here is C. Students not achieving their full potential. So if we say you're not reaching your full potential, it means that you have, on paper, you have the ability to actually reach your potential, which means like your capability, but you're not putting that on the ground. You're not given the opportunity to apply all your potential, to showcase all your abilities or your skills. So the correct answer here is C. Now we move to question number 30. What does the word scaffolding in the 6th paragraph refer to? If you're not familiar with the word scaffolding, it's actually if there is some construction work in a building, usually you see on the streets. Scaffolding is the structures of the poles or the boards that are installed so that the construction workers can actually stand on those. And then usually they allow a passage underneath for people who are passing by or walking on the pavement. Now the key word here itself is scaffolding, so let's go back to the 6th paragraph where it's mentioned. The current pedagogical paradigm is arguably that of constructivism, which emerged out of the work of psychologist Lev Vygotsky. In the 1930s, Vygotsky emphasized the importance of targeting a student's specific zone of proximal development, ZPD. This is the gap between what they can achieve only with support, teachers, textbooks, work, examples, parents, and so on, and what they can achieve independently. So it gets a little bit pedagogical here. So they are talking about some scientific model here where they're saying there is a zone where students can learn by themselves, and then there is another zone where the students need help or support in that region. What he's saying, the purpose of teaching is to provide and then gradually remove this scaffolding until they are autonomous. The writer here is arguing that teaching is all about supporting the student in that zone where they can build their own skills, and then after that they can become autonomous, which means independent. Like they rely on themselves, they don't need the support. And that's what scaffolding means. It means like you put the structure there, help them temporarily to reach that zone where, or to build their skills to the point where they are fully developed, and then you remove the scaffolding when the building is renovated or when the building is strengthened, and then you don't need that structure there, the scaffolding support. If we accept this model, it follows that streaming students with similar ZPDs would be an efficient and effective solutions, and that forcing everyone on the same hike regardless of aptitude would be madness. And aptitude here is your natural skill, is your natural ability. So regardless of aptitude, regardless if you are smart, average, or not a smart person, would be madness, would be like crazy. So to answer question number 30, the word scaffolding here refers to A, the factors which prevent a student from learning effectively, B, the environment where most of the students' learning takes place, C, the assistance given to a student in their initial stages of learning, D, the setting of appropriate learning targets for a student's aptitude. And as I just explained it, the right answer here would be C, the assistance given to a student in their initial stages of learning. Now we move to the next section, which is summary completion, and here we have questions 31 to 35. So complete the summary using the list of phrases A to I below. So we have like a little summary here, and then just underneath it we have 9 options, and we have to choose basically from these options to complete the summary that's in front of us. So the summary here is streaming effective? So according to Professor John Hattie of the Melbourne Education Research Institute, there is very little indication that streaming leads to 31, and then we have to choose. I think it's pretty clear here. My keywords are the name of the professor, and also we have the Melbourne Education Research Institute, so I'm gonna try and locate that in the passage itself, and that would be in paragraph number 7. Despite all of this, there is limited empirical evidence to suggest that streaming results in better outcomes for students. So the writer was actually showing the case that supports streaming, but here this paragraph, as I can tell from the very first sentence, is pretty much against it, or listing the reasons why it doesn't really work. Despite all of this, there is limited empirical evidence. When we say empirical, it means real evidence, or evidence that's based on experimental results, to suggest that streaming results in better outcomes for students. Professor John Hattie, director of the Melbourne Education Research Institute, notes that tracking has minimal effects on learning outcomes. So he's saying that tracking, or the synonym of streaming, which is separating students into different groups according to their level, has minimal effects on learning outcomes. So he's saying that it doesn't really work. What is more, streaming appears to significantly and negatively affect those students assigned to the lowest sets. These students tend to have much higher representations of low socioeconomic class. Less significant is the small benefit for those lucky, clever students in the higher sets. So he's saying even when you separate them, the students with a low level, they will suffer the most. And then also you think those smart or clever students that you put in a separate group are not really benefiting that much. The overall result is that the smart stay smart and the dumb get dumber, further entrenching the social divide. So I think this sentence sums it up in a very clear, in a very simple language. The smart stay smart, they are just staying smart, they're not like getting smarter. And the dumb get dumber, which means the stupid or the less smart students even get more stupid. So to answer number 31, according to the professor, there is very little indication that streaming leads to, and then out of these options, I am gonna say higher achievement, and that is option H. So he's saying it's not benefiting anyone, so they are not achieving any higher results, and that translates into higher achievement. He points out that in schools which use streaming, the most significant impact is on those students placed in the, and I explained it earlier, which was in the lower levels or in the lower groups. So out of all these options here, the correct answer would be option D, the bottom sets. When we say the bottom sets, it means the lower groups. The groups at the lower level are at the very bottom, especially where a large proportion of them have, and then we have 33. So the correct answer here would be disadvantaged backgrounds. So it is not really their fault. They come from underprivileged or disadvantaged backgrounds. So it's like you're making it even worse. It's if those students simply don't get higher results because they don't have access to the best education, when you segregate them or isolate them, you're like making it even worse because it's not really their fault, according to him. So the synonyms here are: these students tend to have much higher representations, and that translates into a large proportion. And then you have low socioeconomic class, which is also a synonym with disadvantaged backgrounds or underprivileged backgrounds. Meanwhile, for the 34, there appears to be only minimal advantage. So as I already explained it earlier, the smart are staying smart and the dumb are getting dumber. It is basically the same thing. There appears to be minimal advantage, which was also highlighted here. Tracking has minimal effect on learning outcomes. So it's already highlighted here, less significant is the small benefit for those lucky, clever students. So there is only a small benefit, which is the same as minimal advantage. And the correct answer here is, meanwhile, for the smart students, which one of these options pretty much give the same idea, is option E, the brightest pupils. Bright means either clever or smart, and a pupil is like a student. A further issue is that teachers tend to have blank 35 of students in streamed groups. I don't think that was mentioned in that paragraph. So if I go and take a look at the paragraph just after it, in the latest of Harry's influential meta-analysis of factors influencing student achievement, one of the most significant factors is the teacher's estimate of achievement. Streaming students by diagnosed achievement automatically limits what the teacher feels the student is capable of. Meanwhile, in a mixed environment, teachers' estimates need to be more diverse and flexible. Okay, so what this paragraph is saying is that when you have those students, especially with low level, in a separate groups, teachers automatically will assume that these students are not really capable of achieving much. So they think they are not smart enough. They already set their mind that these students are not really clever, or they cannot really achieve much, or they are sort of like limited. So it is obviously impacting the students here negatively, according to this paragraph. If the teacher automatically think that this student is stupid, they will probably not teach them something that's like a bit more challenging or something that can benefit them, because they will only be giving them like very simple, and then that will limit their ability. They will always be stuck with like low level type of education if the teacher is not giving them what they are capable of learning. So to answer number 35, a further issue is that teachers tend to have 35, and the correct answer here would be lower expectations of students in streamed groups. Now let's move to the next section, which is questions 36 to 40. Do the following statements agree with the views of the writer in reading passage 3? Yes, if the statement agrees with the views of the writer. No, if the statement contradicts the views of the writer, and not given if it is impossible to say what the writer thinks about this. So here they are specifically asking us about whether the statement agrees with the writer. So there were other people who were mentioned there, like that professor. So we have to sort of like be subjective here, judge the statement based on the views of the writer. So statement number 36, the Vygotsky model of education supports the concept of a mixed ability class. The key word here is the Vygotsky model, and we already went through it, and it was in paragraph number 6. So it's asking whether the writer thinks that the Vygotsky model supports the mixed ability class, where you put all the students with different learning needs and different abilities in the same class. So if I read the last statement, if we accept this model, it follows that streaming students with similar ZPDs would be an efficient and effective solutions. So the writer here is already saying that if we follow this model and based on what is suggested, streaming students with similar ZPDs, which means you separate the students as we explained, would be an efficient and effective solution. So the model here is for streaming, which means that it is against the mixed ability class, and that forcing everyone on the same hike, that would be the mixed ability class model, regardless of aptitude, would be madness. It means like if you force everyone in the same class, it's like crazy. So it's obvious here that the writer say if we take this idea, then this model is most efficient. So if we go back to statement 36, the Vygotsky model of education supports the concept of a mixed ability class. No, he was arguing the complete opposite. You should use streaming instead, not put everyone in the same class. So the correct answer here is no. Statement 37 now. Some teachers are uncertain about allowing students to take on MKO roles in the classroom. So what is an MKO? It is in capital, so that would be our keyword. So let's go to the text and see where we can spot it out. Oh yeah, it's in this paragraph number 9. While streaming might seem to help teachers effectively target a student's ZPD, you can underestimate the importance of peer-to-peer learning. So peer-to-peer learning is that when the students are learning from their classmates. A crucial aspect of constructivist theory is the role of the MKO, which stands for more knowledgeable other in knowledge construction. While teachers are traditionally the MKOs in classrooms, the value of knowledgeable student peers must not go unrecognized either. So what the argument here is saying is that we learn from the teachers obviously in a classroom, but at the same time we should also recognize that students also learn from their classmates. When you have sometimes like some smart students, those smart students tend to actually benefit or also teach some of the skills to those who are less skilled. So that's essentially what the paragraph here is saying. So if I go back to the statement, some teachers are uncertain about allowing students to take on MKO roles in the classroom, it is simply not given. He just mentioned like what it stands for and how the other students can benefit. So here it is not given. Now let's move to statement 38. It can be rewarding to teach knowledge which you have only recently acquired. So where am I going to find this? I'm going to go to the paragraph that's just after the previous paragraph that I read and try and find it there. And that is paragraph number 10. I find it amazing to watch students get over an idea to their peers in ways that I would never think of. So sometimes students get creative, they teach their peers, which means people who are the same as them, like their classmates, in creative ways that the teacher even never thought about. They operate with different language tools and different social tools from teachers, and having just learned it themselves, they process similar cognitive structures to their struggling classmates. There is also something exciting about passing on skills and knowledge that you yourself have just mastered. A certain pride and zeal, a certain freshness to the interaction between teacher and learner that is often lost by the expert for whom the steps are obvious and the joy of discovery forgotten. It can be rewarding to teach knowledge which you have only recently acquired. It is true, because that's exactly what that paragraph is saying. That's what was arguing. Sometimes when teachers are always like repeating or teaching the same thing over and over again, they sort of like lose the excitement. It becomes boring for the teacher. So here what they're saying, there is also something exciting / rewarding about passing on skills and knowledge that you yourself have just mastered. When I say you have just mastered or you have just acquired, it means recently acquired. It just happened like not long ago. When those students, the smart ones, like if the teacher is explaining something and the smart students learn things quickly and they had just learned it, so they recently learned it, it fills them with excitement and also with a lot of thrill that they learn something new and they want to pass it on to their peers or their classmates. So that is what it's saying here. The synonym is that you have recently acquired a certain pride and zeal. So exciting is like rewarding, it makes you proud of yourself. And also there is zeal, which means great enthusiasm and eagerness. It's like you are really excited. So this statement is obviously yes, it can be rewarding. Now with statement 39, the priority should be to ensure that the highest achieving students attain their goals. I can already tell you that that's not really the case here. The statement already doesn't sound correct, because what the writer is arguing from the whole text is that we are considering both sides of the coins here. We're not just like putting the case that benefit only the brightest student, but we are trying to make sure that everyone is in the right group for them. Everyone is in the right set where they can basically improve their skills at the right pace. If you read throughout the text, you get this idea that this is not true, and it is basically no. So the correct answer here is no. The priority here is not the smart students, but benefiting everyone in the equation, whether they are the smart students or the less skilled students. Now, if we move to statement number 40, taking part in collaborative outdoor activities with teachers and classmates can improve student outcomes in the classroom. The key word here is collaborative outdoor activity, and it can also be a synonym with a hike. But if you go to the text in the very last paragraph, if I go through it, having a variety of different abilities in a collaborative learning environment provides valuable resources for helping students meet their learning needs, not to mention improving their communication and social skills. And today, more than ever, we need the many to flourish, not suffer at the expense of a few bright stars. So this sentence actually just confirmed that the statement that I had just gone through was not correct, because the writer here is explicitly saying we need the many to flourish, not suffer at the expense of a few bright stars. So we're not prioritizing the high achieving students. We are basically putting the case for everyone, the many. So if you hadn't already picked that up, this sentence here confirmed that the correct answer was no to the previous statement. Once a year, I go on a hike with my class, a mixed bunch of students. It is challenging. The fittest students realize they need to encourage the reluctant. There are lookouts who report back and extra items to carry for others. We make it together. Okay, so this very last statement that I read is more about this last paragraph. Taking part in collaborative outdoor activities with teachers and classmates can improve student outcomes in the classroom. This is the very last question of reading passage number 3, so they had to make it difficult. And I wouldn't blame you if you actually got it wrong. It's very tricky, and you have to pay attention to the really subtle detail here with these true false not given. So is going on a hike or a collaborative outdoor activity, which is the same as hike, for the teacher and the classmate. What the writer is saying in the last paragraph, he does that with his students. It is challenging, he admits. The fittest students realize they need to encourage the reluctant. You know, those who are smart, like, also they have to encourage their classmates who are not keeping up with their pace. There are lookouts who report back and extra items to carry for others. So there are students with like special needs that you have to carry extra items for. So they work together and then they make it together. Now, so does this really result in a better outcome for everyone? I think the writer here sort of like stayed neutral and he didn't really say. So the correct answer here is not given. He simply say they make it together. Is it really the best case for those who are fit? Is it really the case for those ones who are reluctant, he's not really making any explicit statement or categorically stating here. He just said they had to operate in that environment and they make it together, but is it really the best outcomes for those students? That unfortunately we don't know. So based on that, the right answer here has to be not given. Now this brings me to the end. I really hope that you found the video helpful. I hope that you picked up some synonyms, you learned some new vocabulary today, and please keep on practicing, and I wish you best of luck with your IELTS test. If you haven't subscribed, consider doing so. Until I see you next time, best of luck with your reading and your IELTS test in general.